Hey, thanks for joining us for tonight's Impact Circle. My name is Andrew Palomera. I'm on the staff, learning interpretation staff at Cincinnati Art Museum. I'd like to acknowledge the Shawnee and Meow Meow land that I'm broadcasting from here in Cincinnati, Ohio. This is a conversation program put on by the Cincinnati Art Museum. It's inspired by the artwork Question Bridge, which is made by Hank Willis Thomas, Chris Johnson, Bayate Ross Smith, and Kamal Sinclair. You can see a shorter version of that at questionbridge.com, or if you're in the Cincinnati area, you can catch the full-length version of it in the Hank Willis Thomas All Things Being Equal exhibition, which is open now until November 8th. Tonight's topic for our panel discussion is envisioning, so we're looking at what the future could look like. At the end, I'll give you some instructions on how you can carry the conversation forward with groups of your own. But for now, we will dive into this panel discussion tonight. We have live ASL interpretation over the course of the panel discussion, and there are instructions in the chat window for closed captioning if you need it. There is a Q&A panel on the right side of your screen. If you have any questions or comments over the course of the discussion, feel free to type them in, and we will feed them over to the moderator and try to make time for them at the very end. We will not accept questions that have any hate speech or derogatory content, so don't even try it. We're not going to funnel it through. We're also going to put a link to the program survey right now at the beginning of the program and then at the very end. So if for some reason you can't stay until the end, we'd still love your feedback on what you thought of the program. But we will plug that link again at the very end. So now I'm going to turn it over to Eileen Cooper Reed, who is our moderator for tonight.
Thanks, Andrew. So welcome to the third and final session that we had. We've had some pretty good panels, but I think this one will probably top it all. So we're here tonight to welcome three wonderful folks. We're going to start off with just introducing them. And we can go to Cal Cullen, if we might bring her up. Cal is a social practice artist, arts educator, and curator. She's the founder and executive director of Wave Pool Art Center and the co-founder of the Welcome Project, which is a social enterprise and makerspace for and by Cincinnati's refugee and immigrants. Her work has been shown throughout the U.S. and abroad. Her personal mission is to create empathy and social change through contemporary art. Good evening, Cal. The second panelist is Emma Nuzzo. Emma is a curator, organizer, and educator working at the intersection of art and social impact. She is the current partnerships manager at Four Freedoms, where she works directly with institutional partners to develop collaborations across the country. Nuzzo is currently pursuing a creative project to financially empower students and emerging artists set to launch this fall. And last but not least, we have Mr. Hank Willis Thomas, excuse me. Hank is a conceptual artist working primarily with themes related to perspective, identity, commodity, media, and popular culture. His work has been exhibited throughout the US and abroad. All Things Being Equal is the first major retrospective of his work. It is on view at the Cincinnati Art Museum, as Andrew said, through November 8th. I have been to see it several times, and I'm urging you to make sure that you go and see it because it is an absolute treat. So we'll jump right in if we can. So tonight we're talking about equity and justice and voting and how we go about living in this democracy and the intersection of art and that democracy. So we're going to start off with some questions where we can just get a handle on the umbrella piece of what we're talking about. So I'll ask you first, Emma, how would you define the terms just and equitable? And what does a just and equitable world look like to you?
Well, I think an equitable world is one in which everybody has the tools they need to be able to access a healthy and joyous life. Numerically speaking, in America, we're actually like not far away from that, but it's not the reality we see reflected in the world. The lack of access to tools, to quality education, reliable food, to healthcare, and just like to opportunities. We know that that lack of access is the result of generations steeped and built upon inequitable structures. When you get down to the basics, our country was founded on white supremacy. But I think when we're thinking holistically about equitable world and what that looks like, we need to think not just about the physical tools that people need in order to live a healthy life, but also the emotional and spiritual ones. So much of that is really like about visibility, the visibility of our histories and our culture and our individuality. And in order for us to feel like we're at the table, we need to feel seen and heard and acknowledged. So an equitable future entails not just the abolishment of the systems in which we currently live, but an acknowledgement and reckoning of the history that led us to the place that we are now. We need to feel reaffirmed in that history and the acknowledgement of what has happened in our country in order to really achieve a just society.
Thank you. Thank you. Cal, you want to try that one too? Try it too?
Yeah, sure. I reiterate what Emma said so beautifully. To me, what's just is what is morally right and fair. And justice is really like a call to action. It's not a passive, justice is done, justice has been served, but it's really like a call to make right by people and to value everyone and to feed and to clothe and to bring right to the wrongs that exist in the world. And equity is things that are just and equal, and it's much more complex than just giving everyone the same, because there are such systemic inequities, inequalities that are deep in our culture that we have to offer different things. We have to meet people where they're at and offer people different things so that they have equal voice and equal opportunity. And to me, that's really the core of justice and equity, is that people end up with this equal opportunity and equal voice. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that. Hank, let me switch it up just a little bit, because one of the things I heard Emma suggest is that it's and it's probably true, but it's much more. I don't know if it's much more equitable. That I don't want to paraphrase what she said, but it had to do with the United States versus the rest of the world, and relatively speaking, as this is one of the richest countries in the world, there's probably obviously more resources here. But how do you feel about the equity here specifically and the justice here specifically?
Well, I mean, the name of the show is All Things Being Equal, in part, and it has ... Can you all see me?
No.
What happened?
There you are.
Yeah, the name of the show is All Things Being Equal, and I, with an ellipsis, ... Because of that, or the reason I chose that title is because I think the pathway to equality is always to be continued. That finding balance in our lives, in our communities, in the world is always tenuous and can only be reached on the precipice, yet never fully maintained. And so I think to that reality, I think we have a lot of work to do to reach equality. And once we might have reached it, there will be new generations being born with new obstacles and new problems to fix as the world has changed.
Yeah, equality is almost an aspiration, isn't it? And equity is the kind of the way that you get there, because we're not on a level playing field at this point anywhere. I mean, there just aren't level playing fields. And so part of equity is to address, as you said, Emma and Cal, is to address those inequities, if you will, to address those unlevel places so that people can be made more level and therefore more equal. So the example I like to give between equality and equity is that if I give all of you, if you all need shoes and I give you all size 10s, the only one who's going to be able to wear them is me. I doubt that the rest of you will be. And so that's equal, but it's not, certainly not equitable, because that's not what you need, right? So as people talk about the distinction between equal and equality, that's just a helpful way to do it, to look at it, I think. So this is wonderful. Joy is coming is a term used by the Wide Awakes this fall. Tell us about the Wide Awakes. Hank, you want to start, please?
Sure. I wonder if there's anything about them in the Encyclopedia Britannicas behind Cal.
Yes.
These portray a tainted history. This is part of why we need to rewrite them.
Oh, they probably do have them though, because they started a long time ago, right?
Oh,
so which one are we talking about? Right? I
no,
didn't
you're
say
right.
which one we were talking about.
But still, I don't know. I can't.
Cal, can you see if the Wide Awakes are in there while we're
Let me look it up.
So this is really connected to the history of Cincinnati, especially because Cincinnati is has always been a gateway, and as long as it's been a city and a port city, a place where so many people, Americans, freedom and opportunity from and escape slavery, and many of them did that through the Underground Railroad, as you know, through the incredible museum that you have there. Not far away in Louisville, Kentucky, there was an abolitionist named by the name of Cassius Marcellus Clay, who was part of the very wealthy, by way of slavery, Clay family. Yet he saw immediately the injustice of slavery and hated it and became an abolitionist. And nothing could be more threatening to the cotton industry and to the economy than rich white men who hated slavery from the South. And he went to Hartford, Connecticut, as a presidential candidate to speak against slavery and preach for abolition, and that put his life in danger. And 6 or so shopkeepers gathered around him. They carried torches because they wanted to protect him at night, and they put on cloaks that looked like capes, and everyone thought they looked pretty incredible. And someone said they looked like a bunch of wide awakes. And then almost immediately across, like wildfire across the country, there were these abolitionist, protectionist marching bands and groups called the Wide Awakes, sprouting up across the country, who numbered in the hundreds of thousands by October 3rd, 1816, where there was a torchlight parade for emancipation in Cleveland, in Boston, in Philadelphia, in New York, all over the country, in San Francisco. And no one, and they chose a different candidate, a more working class candidate by the name of Abraham Lincoln, who was not exactly an abolitionist himself, yet they framed him as an abolitionist and pushed him to do that. And soon after that, the Civil War broke out, and by the time the war ended completely, Lincoln was dead, and so was the abolitionist movement that sparked it. And the result was that the Republican Party, which was founded as a pro-women's suffrage, pro-abolition party, and by 1860 pro-immigration party, became, well, what it is today. And it took another 50 years for certain women to get the right to vote. It took another 100 years for Black women to really get some level of suffrage. And then we know that there was a decimation of the indigenous population in those years, and slavery took on another name of mass incarceration. So that was the price of these radical visionaries, opening this door for an amazing opportunity through nonviolent, creative civic action, and that's the price of giving up. You know, I see the suffragettes as a follow-up of the wide awakes movement. We know that the civil rights movement and the Black Power movements were wide awakes movements and moments, and we decided that, you know, we needed to carry the torch of those generations, many of us across the country, and so have been through Civic Joy, trying to rally for a new dimension or new moment of this in this infinite emancipation march. So thank you everyone for the work that you already do, and if you are hearing this message, you're probably wide awake, so please get to work.
Thank you for that wonderful historical narrative that, you know, that taught everybody the course of history in about 5 minutes. We went over about 400 years. So thank you. Emma, I'd like to follow up with you about the joy is coming piece. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think specifically for the wide awakes, when we're talking about joy, it kind of like extends beyond individual joy, and it's really talking about like this collective joy that we can feel in society. The wide awakes also are like a group of creatives that we've held different events here in New York, and it's undeniable that when we congregate, there's kind of this vibration of really positive, joyous energy around us. And I think that's because for the wide awakes, we are coming and trying to create a culture of radical acceptance. And you can really feel joy, not just when you're happy, but when you are able to be in an environment where you feel accepted and valued for everything that you are in all of your imperfections. So I think it's important for us to forecast joy and to put out into the world that joy is coming, because it's necessary to have that hope in order for the joy to arrive, but to consider joy as not just an individual emotion that I experience or you experience, but a way in which we exist together.
So in some ways, happy is an individual feeling, and joy is a more of a communal feeling. Maybe that's what I'm kind of hearing from you. I want to go back for a moment though, because we did have a question about what it is you meant, Emma, when you said that numerically we're close to equality in America.
I think that was a little misunderstood. I more meant numerically in America, we have the financial resources within our country to redistribute, to have an equitable,
Gotcha.
a more equitable system, but things are not distributed in that way.
Gotcha. Gotcha. We're in other words, we're one of the richest countries in the world, and we have all of those resources, and we could more easily be equitable than some other countries could.
Yes,
okay.
And yet we are not. And
right.
We are more inequitable than some countries that don't have the sort of resources we do. And that's because of the structures we've built and live upon.
Okay, thank you so much. Cal, this has not been necessarily, let's talk about the joy. Let me let you talk about the joy for a minute, because you've heard what it is. And this is about art and joy in my mind. So tell me what you think about what you've heard from both Hank and Emma around the joy is coming piece, and how art can be used to promote joy.
Sure. I mean, absolutely, joy is self-fulfilling. And, without the belief that the future can and will be better, there's no reason to work towards a better future, right? So you have to at least in part believe that things will be better in the future and that joy is coming, I think, in order to continue to do this work. I'm a forever optimist. And I think that that's where I get a lot of my energy to continue this work and to continue to support artists that are also doing this work with communities. And I was talking with my friend Rada 2 days ago, and we're working on a project for like a community dinner art project coming up. And she was talking about abundance and how you always have to project abundance because that is when the goddess Lakshmi, who's the goddess of abundance, will come into your house, right? So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I think that that's true both in art and politics and in culture, is like we need to project that we do have enough and that it is maybe just not distributed well, and we can fix that. You know, we have the power to make change. So I think it's a lot about feeling empowered and empowering others.
So Hank, I mean, so you're kind of alluding to it, but why is it important to forecast joy in these times? Because these are pretty tough times, right?
Well, I mean, it's always important to forecast joy. I think, unfortunately, we live and rely in an economy of scarcity, as Cal referenced, and most of us are raised to feel that we don't have enough, and that we won't have enough, and also that we are not enough. And we've been taught to feel embarrassed if about the things that make us happy, truly happy. That if we are too happy, quote unquote, we're silly, we're goofy, we don't have substance, right? And I believe that this kind of training us away from what some might call the path towards spiritual enlightenment is something that has bore certain fruits. And I think that what we think about abundance, you know, joy and love are infinite, right? You cannot calculate what happens if you put the positive vibrations into the universe. And we can see that, of course, in the work of Martin Luther King, but we can also see that in most forms of Black music, Black American music, where there is this kind of joy that has also emerged through the pain and suffering of generations that is so defiant and so indestructible that the world moves around it. And so what if we could channel, you know, various forms of joy, especially Black joy, which is universal, into, you know, affirmative civic action? What could we then produce, and how might the world be different? Is the question that this project asks.
The which project? The Wide Awake project or For Freedom? Tell me which, or everything, or everything you do.
I said that on purpose because I don't think that it's I think Emma's new business. I think many of Cal's work. I think the interpreter. I think you and Ken, who's been keeping us able to do this. All of us are part of the same project. It's the project of living in this moment. We are living in an inflection point in human history. People will wonder who we are, who we were, what we did right here and right now. And we could say, oh, it was really terrible. It was so sad. I was so mad. I was so angry. And then we started fighting. And then we had a war because we hated each other. Or, you know, if we find a way to double down on love and positivity, which of course joy is a critical part of, maybe we can say, you know, we realized that the way we were doing things in the past was not serving us as a species, and that we needed to change ourselves. We need to change our society and the rules upon which we engage. So we put love over rules. Yes. And this is why we live in this abundant society in the year 2032.
So you're absolutely intent on connecting art and the civic body and joy all together, and making sure that all of it works together to move us forward in a joyful way.
Well, the beauty of, if the beauty of being in the creative field is that our badge, if we had a deputy or sheriff's badge, it would be like new ideas. It would say like, we are the marshals of the future, because what
Yes.
we actually do in our work is make things for tomorrow. Nothing
Yes.
we make is for the past, and not even for this moment. We really are creating for future.
Yeah, that's almost true of every creative process, isn't it? Regardless of whether it's what we call traditional art or whether it is the art of cooking or the art of whatever it is we do, it's always for what's happening, not now, but what's happening in the future.
Yeah, that's why I think that artists and entrepreneurs are prophets in a sense, in that we envision something, we imagine something that has not yet occurred, and then set about on a path of making that real. And I think the channeling of the world and ideas towards making something that others can engage into is what is prophetic.
Yep. Yeah. So Emma, take that prophetic piece and talk a little bit about Four Freedoms, if you would.
Yeah. So Four Freedoms, we are a collective for creative citizenship. We like to use art and creativity to bring further nuance into political conversation. And our current fall initiative is centered in trying to create a culture around listening, healing, awakening, and justice. And really, the way that creativity is harnessed by Four Freedoms is like there are so many levels, but at its core, when two people come to something as if it's art, they come ready to listen to each other's opinions. They come curious and wanting to have a conversation. And if you and I look at a piece of art and disagree, we kind of want to know, well, like, why do you see that and I see something else?
Mm-hmm.
And we might like leave that conversation with a different idea than we had going into it. Whereas when we come to a topic as if it's political, we come ready to fight about what we already believe in.
Mm-hmm.
And so with Four Freedoms, it's critical for us to use art as a way to reduce us down to what makes us inherently human so that we can connect with one another. And this, I think, connection and understanding. And then on top of that, like letting artists kind of lead the way into this radical imagining of how we can exist together. That's really what Four Freedoms is about. It's about thinking about new ways in which we can exist and make the world better, using art and creativity to illuminate that path.
So that's why you all are here to talk about envisioning, because you're talking about reimagining. You're talking about what you want the world to look like, and how people ought to consider relating to one another and relating to ideas where that'll carry us forward. Cal, this seems to fit, to me anyway, not knowing, into the Welcome Project and how and the work that you do. Could you describe a little bit about the Welcome Project and how it might relate to what we're
Sure. Yeah, and
talking
Wave
about?
Pool is the bigger
And Wave Pool,
umbrella.
yes.
Yeah, so Wave Pool started as an art center, self-fulfilling as an artist, trying to figure out how artists in Cincinnati can be valued, get paid, make work in the city. And then trying to address artist needs very quickly became addressing community needs. It became, well, we need a place to get food in this food desert neighborhood. We need healthcare. We need we need transportation. We need all these things, right? And so
Yes.
very quickly, we now have this like campus that includes the Welcome Project and a market as part of it, and a wood shop with classes and ceramics and all these things, and it's become this like really beautiful I kind of feel like it's a little oasis in the city, at least for me, and for the neighbors and community partners that are part of it. So yeah, my vision is really to figure out ways for artists to be fairly valued and seen as indispensable in community planning and development of our future society. And I feel like this little corner that we've created and are continuing to create is proof of concept that it works, that artists can make communities like functioning and equitable and really beautiful. So that's where I want to go, is just making the rest of the world like this little corner that a lot of people still neglect and don't see, but that's what's great about it, is that it's a secret.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Where is it located?
We're in Camp Washington.
In Camp Washington, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
so yeah, it's like a post-industrial neighborhood that's been neglected for a long time, and that's where artists often see possibility and you know, making something out of nothing.
Yes.
But also there's so much to hear, you know, it's really about just seeing the assets over the deficits. Yeah.
Okay. So we have another question from the audience. The question is, can capitalism really lend itself to being equitable for everyone? Can it be inclusive? There is a movement called inclusive capitalism that apparently so. Who wants to tackle that one? Anyone?
I'm highly suspect that anything that prioritizes the I over the we can function for all.
Hank, Emma?
I think this is I'm gonna say ditto to that. I think it's difficult because when we talk about any of these systems, like there are infinite ways in which they can like exist and manifest in our world, but fundamentally capitalism is built off the back of oppressing some for the benefit of others, and that's just how I see it.
Okay. Thank you. Hank, did you want to tackle that one? Do you want me to move on?
Well, I feel like I would love to learn. I will look more into inclusive capitalism, and there definitely is a big move towards new capitalism that moves away from the profit agenda that a lot of major corporations have been working under for the past 50 years or 45 years or something like that.
Or
And,
like 100 years.
and so I think, you know, we're definitely in need of something new. I can say that for sure. And, however whatever that is will require us to be creative.
Isn't that the truth? Isn't that the truth? So let's talk about envisioning an equitable future. COVID came by, and as it came through, or as it's coming through, continues to come through, what it has done is pull back the drapes from inequities that already existed. The inequities that we see more starkly now, perhaps, it always existed. I mean, they existed in the history that you described, Hank. You know, and it also has caused some systems to crumble. It's difficult for systems to change, actually, you know, but it has made them crumble. So if we're going to envision a more equitable future, what part of our current society needs to be preserved, and perhaps which parts of it need to be hospiced, so that as the crumbling occurs, people are not harmed as much, perhaps. Emma, you wanted to weigh in on that one.
Yeah, so I think that we really need to begin to care about each other in a radical way. And when I say care about each other, I mean about strangers, people we don't know, people that we have nothing in common with. We need to begin to care about each other in a radical way. There's actually right now for 4 Freedoms this fall campaign, the 2020 Awakening, there's a public art piece, a billboard up in New Jersey by the artist and poet Aja Monet, and it reads, what are you willing to sacrifice so that we can be free? And that makes me think, you know, that it is simply true that many of us are going to have to peacefully and enthusiastically relinquish some of the privileges that come as the result of other people's oppression. And like, this is literally all around us, from where we get our books to where we buy clothing, issues of race and gender, to really just as well the ability for some people to ignore blatant injustices in our system that don't directly impact them. You know, I didn't say that numerically we have the ability to, I don't want to say fix, it's not a panacea, but we have the ability to have great impact on some of these like inequalities in our country. And we're only going to get there if we care about the health of our society over the individual. You know, American society is all about the individual. The American dream is about the ascent of the individual out of poverty, but it doesn't talk about the communities that those people come from. So thinking about America in general and like how we achieve that is we simply need to start to conceive of ourselves and our success as communal and less individualistic, and think about the health of ourselves as communities and societies rather than just individual units.
Thanks. Hank, if we're going to have more equitable, what needs to stay, what needs to go? Do you know?
Am I frozen?
Oh, you are.
Okay, I'm having all kinds of technical problems tonight.
But we can hear you. You're frozen. Your picture's frozen. But you look good frozen. So that's
I think
that's not.
But where are we going? What needs to change? I think, as I said, the whole system of reality that we have needs to change. We are making the moment together, the present moment, the reality that we understand is something that we make. We talk about the news like it's real, whereas instead it's something that someone edited to say this is what's important that happened today, which implies that all the other things that we don't know about are not important, and all the people who we don't know about are not important.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for myself, demanding that I look closer and think deeper about at the stories that I'm told and the decisions that I make as a result of them, whether be about who I hang out with, where I go, how I get there, what I buy. Those, not to say that I should be excluding myself from being able to do things I want. I think me and everyone should be invited to and trained to learn how to look and speak critically at the world, and then find avenues to make new pathways. And so I think one thing that I would say definitely needs to change is that there should be at least 30% of any political body should be artists. Because if you have political bodies that are divorced from creativity or see that as a hobby, then how can we ever tackle complicated issues? So, so I'm a big advocate for artists as civic leaders.
Yeah, I do think
artists.
Yes, I do think that we leave out artists far too often. We leave out a lot of people actually, and so part of moving forward would need to be making sure that we're inclusive. We're inclusive of that creativity. We're inclusive of people with different stories, I think. And you talked about stories. You said it a couple of times, and the news are a bunch of stories, right? The news we hear are stories that people make up, and frankly, we make up our own stories too. So if we don't like the ones we have, we can think about making up new ones, you know, and then making up communal ones, and not allowing other people to create our narratives for us, which is kind of what is happening now. So allowing us to people creating their own narratives, that probably are part of envisioning the future. Cal, you look like you had something that you wanted to add.
Well, I was just going to add, you know, going beyond inclusion, we should be centering those that are the most vulnerable. You know, historically, hospitals and asylums, and prisons are on the outskirts of cities. Like, that's just how city planning has been done. And it's really, I think, a symbolic gesture for marginalizing those who are in most need, and we need to be centering them. And I think that, you know, the people piece of society is what needs to stay. The humans need to be that's the part of society that we keep. Everything else can shift based on their needs.
Yeah, the marginalized people are once again used by the society in order to be able to support other folks in jobs and things like that. So I'd like to add on to what you said, you know, not nearly the number of people who are in prison should be there, period. You know, so let's talk about, you know, pushing it further back so that we don't even have as many people in prison. My father used to run the prison system in Ohio. That's why I know. And he used to say, oh, about 10% of the people who were here ought to be here. And that was, from when he came to now, they have 10 times more people in prison. You know, so 10 times, and this was no more than, this was about 50 years ago. You know, and so we need to do something about not feeling like we need to lock our people up. We do that more than any other country in the world. We have the highest rate of incarceration. So even of all the ones that we say are more authoritarian. Are there any parts that you think, and you've kind of alluded to it or talked about it, Hank, so that part ought to be completely reimagined. Are there any other parts that you just think ought to be completely reimagined? Like education?
I think race and gender should be completely reimagined.
Okay.
They're both systems of ideas that demand a hierarchy that serves and often puts people who are frankly unequipped in positions of power to manage the power correctly. And it also brings certain people, many of whom who have the ability to lead and to handle great capacity in a default subservient position. So I think that one of the very exciting things about the ways in which the world is moving is we're starting to have to talk about gender differently, and we're starting to have to talk about race differently. And I think the sooner we do that, the sooner we can address the other major kind of obstacle we face, which is class, which relies on race and gender as means to actually be able to kind of codify the system.
And to separate people so that they will be at each other, as opposed to those folks who have made the codification, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
We have a question for Four Freedoms. Has done an incredible job raising awareness to communities and the parts of society that choose to pay attention. Yet has there been a plan to bring the message to elected officials more directly for the purpose of policy changes?
Well,
go on.
I believe that we're working on that. I think we also approach it from this perspective that we don't know what's best. You know, that's why we focus on the questions. You know, we think that the right questions aren't being asked, and the right people aren't even given the platform to ask the questions. And so part of the billboard campaign that Emma talked about, where we have over 90 billboards by 70, almost 80 artists in all 50 states, plus DC, Puerto Rico, the US Virgin Islands, and Guam, yeah, is to like start to set the stage for, if you're not going to give us the microphone somewhere, we're going to just use the tools that we have access to put the questions out into the world. And so we have been operating, and we're 5 years old almost, and my daughter's only 2, but I can tell you that you can only do but so much in 5 years. And so as we mature, hopefully to the ripe old age of 18, I believe we will finally be able to make feel comfortable that the foundation that we're on is strong. So I say that to say that I believe that there are people who are in the future going to run for office as wide awakes. I believe that For Freedoms will at some point try to be more directly involved in policy. I also believe that that will require a level of maturity that we don't yet have. Emma?
I come from I'm the partnerships manager at For Freedom, so I love these ideas. I hope that we one day get there. And I'm also the practical person that keeps in mind that I want us to retain the ability to work with universities and nonprofits. But I think that, For Freedoms, there's an infinite level of things that we can do with the platform that we create through creativity. So whether it's policy change or empowering local museums to see themselves as civic leaders, it's impacting change. It's impacting change as it's felt on the ground,
Yeah, but I see you going over to policy, because if you don't do a policy, because it's policies that has kept all of this inequity in place for the last 400 years. It really is. And so you're going to get there. I know you are. Cal, you want to add all to just about policy and how you see art and policy, or do you? I know that you were, as I said when I was asking about the Welcome Project, do you do any policy work in that project?
Very little. Yeah, we partner with Cincinnati Compass, who's the local like immigration and refugee policy force by the city. But yeah, very little policy work at the Welcome Project. Through public service artists, we've done a couple of campaigns that have attempted to address policy directly. We had a exhibit up at City Hall last year about the tax abatement issue in the city in David Mann's office. Just how the property tax abatements in the city affect education in Cincinnati, and you probably know about that.
Pretty good one, yeah. Yeah, but a pretty good one.
I think we just posted a big question that says, who benefits from tax abatements? Something like that. Just again, to what Hank was saying about posing questions and getting people to think and talk. Yeah.
Who benefits is always a good question when you're dealing with policy. Who's benefiting from this policy? Because that is a part, has to be a central part of the discussion, and who is not, and why not? So but I want to get back to Emma. You did allude to the work with museums and how you can how museums can be involved in change as well. So when do museums need to lead in this future, and when do they need to follow the lead of other groups, communities, and organizations, do you think?
I tend to feel on the side that they need to be places in which community members can harness their power. So it's not as if they're not leaders themselves, but they're more like kind of ways for the people that museum is supposed to serve to be able to harness that power. you know, museums, they are a place for congregation. They are a place that encourage people to self-reflect. They encourage people to come together, but at the same time, if they're not beholden to the communities that they serve, I think we've seen that things can go wrong in terms of how they execute their mission of serving those communities. So it's a fine balance where, yes, museums are leaders because art spaces need to be leaders in promoting creative thought, but simultaneously, it's the local communities who are made up of artists and individuals who might not think of themselves as artists, but are, that need to help have a big influence on those museums to together enact change in those communities.
Thank you. Cal, I know you wanted to weigh in on this one.
Yeah, similar to what Emma said, actually, museums, their goal is to display and interpret objects of cultural significance, right? And so they should always be following the lead of the culture and of the people. So to me, museums should be, I like to say, leading from behind, following the people, following the way culture is going, and not trying to invent it or highlight something that's obscure that's going to speak to only a certain elite part of society. But they really should be reflecting society and becoming a space for the commons to congregate. Yeah.
So we're gonna end with you, Hank, because it seems to me that all things being equal and the programming that has occurred around it is one way in which this art museum has taken some leadership, and I'm really happy to see that. So what do you have to add to that conversation that you think that people need to know as we finish? You're on mute.
I'm so grateful that the exhibition has been on display in Cincinnati, and that my work has had such an impact there, and especially at this time in the country's history. I hope that people who go to my show take away from it things that are encouraging, that are enlightening, and that they can share with others. So I'm really just appreciative of the programming and also the opportunity to exhibit.
Well, thank you. Your art's exciting. This has been a great conversation. The circles that we're talking about doing past here are wonderful. So I'm really glad to have been a part of this. And so thank you all for being here and for contributing so wonderfully to this conversation. Come back soon, please. Andrew, off to you.
Wow, that was awesome. I'm so grateful for all of y'all. Thank you. I feel like we probably could have gone on for another 30, 40 minutes, but I gotta stick to the time. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we wanted to do something a little bit different with this panel discussion format, and we wanted to basically give those of you that are watching the tools to have conversations about this topic and similar topics with people in your life. It could be your family, your neighbors, your faith community, your coworkers, could be a mix of those people. We know sometimes the thing that is missing is the question that jumpstarts. And so we have a question that we would like to share with y'all to then go take to groups in your circles, in your communities. And it's this one here on the screen. What steps are necessary to live in a more equitable society? And what would you personally be willing to sacrifice to make this a reality? So you can, like I said, go form your own group. Obviously, follow the COVID-19 guidelines. Don't be getting into a small room packed together without masks. Be responsible. But feel free to take this question and run with it. If you want to, you can send a response back to us at the web address below, cincinnatiartmuseum.org/HWT Impact Circles. There's a submission form on the page where you can submit a response, and it can be in any form. It could be in writing, video, an artwork. It could be An audio recording could be a number of things. Don't have to submit a response if you don't want to, but if you'd like to, you can send it back to us, and we'll either put it in the exhibition while it's still up, and especially if there's anything that relates back to the question that we posed today about museums' role in it, we definitely want to hear from y'all on that as well. I want to turn things back over to Emma real quick because as we mentioned in this panel discussion, as y'all are acutely aware, there's a big election coming up next week. And we want to make sure that if you haven't voted, that you go and vote early or on election day on Tuesday. But Emma, you want to talk a little bit about some of the voter resources that For Freedoms has to offer?
Yeah, for sure. So I encourage everybody to go to the website that right now is posted on the screen, For Freedoms /answer the call. That is where you can find all of For Freedoms voting materials, information, guides. We have a few different things. First of all, we have a program where if you text AWAKE to 33339, you'll be opting in for some Civic Joy text notifications that kind of break the mold of what you typically get when you do those voter opt-in text notifications that are like, are you going to the polls? These more are encouraging and promote joy and encourage you to get your community involved as well. On the website, we have a bunch of materials that help you just gain knowledge around voting that can both help you and others in your community. So you can go in and there's a tool to find your polling place, to check your registration, but there's also myth versus fact sheets about voting. There's guides that are state by state because, as we know, our systems are trying to make it more and more difficult for us to be able to cast our ballot and make our voices heard. So, this website has materials so that you can ensure that not only you are ready to vote, you're ready to talk to somebody who might not be excited about voting and help them kind of like, get to the polls themselves. And then also information that you need to know for your state and about how you vote. But then we are also partnering with a project called Joy to the Polls, which is going on now through November 3rd. And I encourage you to go and follow them on Instagram at Joy to the Polls. They have been working to bring joy and health to people waiting in those extremely, extremely long voting lines, 6 feet apart. They're bringing PPE to ensure that everybody has a safe experience, but also performances, dancing, other ways to kind of lighten the mood and make people feel like this is something that they're excited and happy to do rather than just like a duty. And so you can check out what they're doing on Instagram at Joy to the Polls. And there are ways to get involved, including creating a playlist. One other thing they're doing is creating Joy to the Polls playlists, not just with individuals like you and I, but also with celebrities, so that while you're waiting in line, you can listen to, Obama's Joy to the Polls playlist and get yourself psyched to, fill out your ballot.
Awesome, thanks, Emma. And we have included this link to answer the call, as well as the Ohio fact sheet on the Impact Circles page. So if you want to find it there, you can as well. So before we wrap up for the night, I want to thank Eileen for not only moderating tonight's panel, but she moderated the previous 2, which you can also find recordings of on our website if you missed those. So massive shout out to Eileen for being such a fearless leader over the last couple of months. I want to thank Hank and Cal and Emma for joining us tonight, for bringing your ideas and your love and joy. I want to thank Jessica, our ASL interpreter. She's been with us for all 3 Impact Circles, and she's done an outstanding job. I want to thank the Hank Willis Thomas Community Steering Committee, members of the Cincinnati community who helped staff like me and many others on staff plan this exhibition and plan the programming. Their ideas were instrumental in this program that you are watching right now. And I definitely want to give a shout out to them. And then finally, you can't see him, but I want to thank Ken Newhouse, our IT director, who has made sure that all 3 of these impact circles have run smoothly. We have not had any major tech issues, and we're at 7:59, so I think we can call that a success. Thank you, Ken. You've done an outstanding job on making something that's pretty complicated, pretty simple for all of us. So this was our final impact circle. I want to thank all of you for coming tonight. If you missed the other 2 that were in September and early October, like I said, you can find the recordings on the Impact Circles page at the museum's website. There will be a recording of this one pretty shortly, either later this week or early next week. And we will keep those recordings on our website so that you can watch them whenever you want, because we've found that these are not only good resources for the moment, but we think they're good resources for being better people, and we think that they're going to come in handy down the road. So that's all I've got to say for tonight. Thanks again to everyone who participated. Stay safe, take care, and have a good night.